Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. So welcome to the OT is In podcast. In today's episode, we're going to continue our discussion on self-regulation of the parent. I think we've all been in situations where we recognize, wow, that escalated quickly and largely because of me, or asked ourselves the question, how do I help my child when my body feels tense and anxious? So my guest today is Whitney Whitten, another OT homeschool mom combination. Whitney is homeschooling mother of four who is passionate about supporting parents in their own sensory processing and self-regulation. Whitney discusses how parents can influence their children's state of regulation through purposeful actions and words. So you will discover practical tips for self-regulation, like using earplugs to manage overstimulation, or engaging in calming activities, some oral, like drinking from a straw, or some proprioceptive, like leaning against a wall. Whitney also shares valuable resources available on sensationalmoms.com and other platforms, highlighting the importance of being a regulated and peaceful presence for our children. So whether you're a parent looking for guidance on handling dysregulated moments or a homeschooling mom seeking strategies to balance busy schedules, this episode is packed with insights and tips. So tune in to explore the power of self-awareness, adaptability, and self-compassion in nurturing both yourself and your children. Thanks for listening. Let's get started. In episodes 29 through 32, you'll be hearing more about sensory processing. As we are beginning the school year, I don't know about you, but I feel even more demands. Even though I truly believe we're learning all the time, even through the summer, fall brings new rhythms, new routines, sports practices, co-ops starting, everything. This year, our family were even making dietary changes requiring more time cooking. My kids need me differently, and I need to be available to them. And this requires me to be intentional about my own sensory processing so that I can co-regulate with them. My body must be regulated so that they can be. You'll be learning more about this during the podcast, but we do go even deeper in the sensory balanced homeschool focus group. So this is a month-long class where new material comes to you in bite-sized chunks every week. You'll learn about each of the 8 sensory systems, ways to study your student to find more about their needs, strategies to help regulate the brain and body, and most importantly, a community of other homeschool families like yourself. I did mention that it's a month long, but I also know how busy that we can get as homeschool moms. So you have lifetime access to the group, including an invitation to our live question and answer, which happens approximately every 3 months in that group. We'd love to have you join us. You can find more information at homeschoolot.com, or more specifically, homeschoolot.com/sensory-focus-group. Hope to see you there. Now, on with the show. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In podcast. Today, I have another homeschool mom / occupational therapist within our community. Whitney, is that your married name or is that
Oh,
always been
yes.
your name?
Yes. I definitely thought about that by date number 2 or 3. I thought, man, if this lasts, this is going to be really interesting.
That's amazing. Just when I was
Yeah.
getting ready to say it, I was like, wait a minute, let me check in on that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Whitney does a lot of work with actually homeschool parents, specifically on sensory processing, self regulation, so that you can co regulate. But before we get started and dive into that, Whitney, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into this homeschool world and what you do now?
Yeah, of course, Sarah. So I landed in homeschooling really as a matter of convenience, honestly.
Huh.
I had 4 kids in 5.5 years.
Yeah,
And when I sat down to look at what our schedule was going to be like between preschool car line and school pickup car line, my mind was blown. And so I thought, I'm going to try homeschooling. It's just kindergarten, is how we started. And now,
yeah,
7 years later, for we have other reasons now, of course, but just to be able to give the kids time to be kids and to
I
have
love
the
that.
flexibility for just developmentally appropriate play. That's what I chose when they were younger, and it looks different now, but that's generally our why now. And as an occupational therapist, looking at the school day, what that would mean for my kids, I just wanted something different.
I love
So
that.
homeschooling was the perfect fit for us.
Perfect. We laugh almost every beginning of the school year because we live directly across the street from our elementary school. And my
Oh,
daughter
wow.
plays volleyball for the high school, but you have to cut through one to the other. And so, always when I'm going to get into volleyball, we have to go through the car line. And I'm always like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out. And my kids are cracking up laughing at me. Like, what is
Yes.
wrong with you, mom? I can't manage. I can't hang in a car line. I don't know
Oh,
what's wrong.
no, no, that's a whole thing. So no,
Right?
I had to bypass that, that's for sure. But we
For
chose
sure.
other hardships as homeschool moms,
Right.
right? That we
Hmm.
may not have realized we were choosing when we chose this lifestyle. And so that's why I do what I do working with moms.
I love that. There are so many parents that will say to me, I don't know how you do that, like how you do homeschool. And I think we each kind of choose our hard, right? Like, I actually
Yes,
think it's really difficult to get up and get our kids out the door when we have to do that. And there's a lot of hardship in both sides. And so, really choosing, there's not one right way to do it, one right way to
that's
educate
right.
your kids. So, I love that what started out as one reason has now grown into to many others. I love that. So, in episode 29, Gigi Vincent, which was our episode last time, she helped us to define co regulation. But I'd actually really love to hear your explanation and how you talk to your parents about co regulation as well.
Yes, so I think that as moms, a lot of us have the experience of realizing that our kids feed off of us, that we set the tone, we set the beat for the day and the home. So being able to just put the word with that is what helps. So co-regulation is the name for the thing. It's not just in your head, right? If you're having a bad day and then everything spirals down south real fast, it's not just in your head. It's a real thing. And it
Right.
works the other way around, just like how we influence our child in those moments of dysregulation for us, we can also lift them up and out of that to our state of regulation positively using those tools of co-regulation. It happens whether we mean it to or
Mean to.
not. So
Mhm.
choosing co-regulation is purposeful actions and words that influence our child's state of regulation.
Oh, I love that quote. Purposeful actions and words. So, can you give us some examples of what that would be?
So I think that an example of that would be I'm thinking about one of my kiddos who tends to be more anxious. I can, when she is having a spiral moment and those negative experiences that she has, I can join her in that without realizing it.
Mm,
And instead of choosing my own regulation first and helping her find her own place of calm and connection. So it certainly takes a lot of awareness to realize what's going on my part in those moments.
yeah. And so, an obvious requirement, what you're talking about here, is that we as parents are regulated ourselves. We're processing all that sensory information that's coming in. How when you're talking to parents, how do you help them to, or help us, right? I'm a parent too, help us to
Right.
recognize when we are regulated and when we are in our own state of dysregulation?
So it's easier to start. We think of extremes. I think we all have those moments where we can think of times where we either said or did something that we weren't proud of in dysregulation. And we know what that
Yes.
feels like, right? And then it's harder to think of the opposite sometimes, to think of those positive moments. So I think it starts first with just realizing, okay, you know what? Today I had a really good day. Okay, what does a good day mean for you? Whether it was a moment where you really had a positive experience with your kid cooking in the kitchen or playing a board game, or that connection is usually key. Then we go back in that moment and we really think, okay, what did that feel like in
Mm,
your body at that time? And sometimes it's hard to do that too far removed from the
right.
situation, so as close to it as you can. So I know you've talked in the past about interoception, so that would be
Mhm.
key here. What was your muscle tension?
Right.
What was your heart rate? What was your breath rate? Those sorts of things. And you would also do the same thing for those challenging moments, right? And so you can compare, this is what regulated feels like, this is what dysregulated feels like. So it also begs the question, what is a good moment for
I
you
was
as a
just thinking that of good
yeah.
moments for that I feel versus good moments in somebody else's house might be different. So, yeah, how do you define that?
Yeah, so that is one of the things that I definitely work through with moms because that looks different for all of us. But I would say that by and large, the words connection come up often. I felt really connected and present in the moment. Also, an experience of being able to be in a flexible mindset. A lot of us as homeschool moms don't realize going into it how much flexibility it really requires. I'm
Mm,
thinking about that as I'm planning my fall schedule, and 7 years into it, I'm just now looking at it thinking, okay, this is almost laughable to make these schedules, knowing that it's going to end up being different and the flexibility that it demands from us on a day-to-day basis.
that
So,
decision continuously.
yes, in the moment. And usually being in that regulated state, having good moments feel like being able to be flexible and responsive to our
To your
child or to
children. I love
ourselves,
that.
to the situation in those moments.
I love
Yeah.
that. Peaceful is what comes up in my mind. Like when I'm trying to think about in our days, and I was actually thinking about today, we are still in our summer mode, which means that I have a lot of different things. It doesn't mean that I'm not, I don't want to say the word busy because we're all busy at all different times, but what we're trying to do, at least in our home, is get out of this busy, have always having to do something, but instead have our priorities set and just have our different occupations. How we occupy our time is
Exactly.
different. So today I'm canning cucumbers, which first off, let's just talk about that I'm canning cucumbers because never in a million years would I have thought that this is what I was going to be doing in my life.
I've actually
But
got salsa waiting. I've got the
yeah,
tomatoes ready for me to can some salsa in the fridge.
it makes me laugh so hard. But I was doing it, but I'm working really hard. It's not something that I really enjoy. I am not a person who loves being in the kitchen, but we have set as a family now the need to eat at home more regularly. My daughter now has some dietary restrictions, things like that, that we need to be really cognizant of. Canning pickles it is. And as I was doing it, I was like, all right, Sarah, you have a choice to moan about this or to really feel peaceful. And one of my boys came in and he was talking to me as we're going. And I just felt a difference when I set my mind to all right, this is what's going to happen right now. And being able to do it with my kids versus just on my own and feeling stressed about it and angry and holding my shoulders really tight. And then my heart rate is going faster. And I've got the emotion and the feelings that are not positive. Or on the flip side, to really body scan and
Mhm.
try to have that regulated state as I'm doing something even that I don't necessarily enjoy.
And I think that so many of us, when we choose homeschooling, we want those moments. We want those moments where the learning and the connection just seems to happen.
Mhm.
And when we're given those opportunities, how often do we shut them down because we're in a
Yeah.
different state of mind or we're not feeling regulated? So regulation is just so key.
So being an OT and a homeschool mom, let's talk through what your homeschool day looks like and how do you structure to help yourself to be regulated?
As an OT, I'm going to say that, of course, there is no one size fits all solution, right?
Right.
Because our nervous systems are all different. Just knowing that going into it, we have to be students of ourselves, and we have to look at our situation and our patterns of regulation non-judgmentally and realistically, and just accept it for what it is, showing ourselves the same kindness that we would show our child. I try to approach things the same way for myself. Patterns are step one, respecting my own circadian rhythms as much as I can. And if I'm not a morning person and I don't want to start our morning lessons at 8 o'clock sharp, that's okay. So when I think about our schedule and think about our day, I don't try to make my day look like someone else's
Everyone
day.
else's, yeah. Or yeah, not even everyone else's, because there are no two homeschools that are alike.
Exactly. Right? And also showing respect for the fact that what's working for me now might not be working for me 6 weeks from now or 12 weeks from now. I set those times to reassess what's working. So that's really important. So I do definitely look at my optimal patterns of alertness and I plan accordingly. If I crash after lunch, I'm probably not going to want to do math with my kid that has a hard time participating in math at that time. And so those can be a lot of moving pieces, right?
Yeah.
Trying to consider my kids when it's best for them and what's best for me. But I keep in mind being adaptable to the least flexible person.
That's smart.
For me, honestly, I need to be okay with the fact that during some seasons, it's going to be me.
Yeah.
My husband's out of the country right now. He's traveling to China for almost a month. We don't do that often. So guess who's probably one of the least adaptable people right now? Me.
Yeah,
right?
you. That's okay. Yeah.
Be okay with that. Give ourselves the same grace that we show our children.
Now, do you talk to your children about that and about self-regulation and your own regulation?
I do. I definitely do. Mainly because that was the game changer in getting one of my children who was very much struggling with self-regulation to actually consider the value of this. She wouldn't listen to it because I was a hot mess.
Yeah.
And so the curriculum, we're OTs, right? We have all the tools. We have all of the different choices available to us, zones of regulation, alert, all of these things.
Yeah, the alert program.
Sinking in because I wasn't modeling that for them in a meaningful way. So yes, I use that language very often. I have a little script that I use when I'm really having a hard time and I need to just go to my room or go outside and feed the chickens.
Can you share that? Because I know a lot of parents, I know a lot of parents are like, ooh, tell me. So what is your script that you use?
Oh yeah, you're going to be so blown away by how simple it is, Sarah. It usually just goes like this. I'm having a hard time right now. It's not you, it's me. I just need a minute.
Yep.
And I think the key is practicing that outside of those stressful situations so that we've talked about self-regulation. We've laid the groundwork for understanding what it is so that I don't just pull this wild card during hard times. And then it's all just associated with just this reaction mom has when I've said the wrong thing or when my brother and I are fighting and things are loud. So the context and the preparation really matters.
I'm going to interrupt this episode for a bit of a funny story. Well, at least it's funny now. When we started homeschooling, this wouldn't have been so funny. My daughter was in 4th grade and she is now in 11th for a bit of perspective. But I did not trust myself, nor did I know how long this experiment of home education while moving to a new state was going to last. I didn't want her to learn math differently than her peers so that she'd be ready when she went back to, quote, real school. In Pennsylvania, our school systems allow us to borrow curriculum, so I borrowed their math curriculum. But they don't let us borrow the teacher's guide, only the student portion. So every day, my 4th grader and I would sit down and do math together. I had a 1st grader and a 1-year-old also running around my feet, and I never knew if I was 100% correct because I didn't have the answers. So we dove into an introduction to decimals and fractions, but it did not take long before we were both frustrated. before we both dreaded what I heard was going to be this beautiful experience of us learning together. She finally said to me, "Mom, your brain is not like mine. Dad does it better." Sucker punch. I'd like to think that I reacted beautifully, but I don't think that I did. Our relationship was suffering, and looking back, that dread was causing me to be tense, and it affected the rest of my day, as well as my relationship with my then 6-year-old and 1-year-old. She was not learning at the pace she wanted, and nor was she retaining as much information. Because as you know through these episodes, memory and retention require sensory regulation. Neither of us were regulated. So we started using CTC math, and our homeschool changed. She was able to go at her pace, moving through lessons and spending time in areas that she needed or with new concepts, but not with things that she already understood. She stayed with CTC math until last year when she took pre-calculus and now calculus at our community college for college credit. But more importantly, our relationship did not have this daily disruption. So if you're looking for a math curriculum that works with your kids at their pace and where you can be as involved or as uninvolved as your relationship allows, CTC Math is a perfect fit. So visit ctcmath.com. Now back to the show. So I absolutely love that you are talking about how you use this on a day-to-day basis, because you're right. If it is only in the heat of the moment, then our kids think that it's only a problem with them. Like in the heat of the moment, I'm going to tell you about how do we get our bodies back into the green zone, or how is your engine running right now? However,
Right.
if it becomes kind of part of our day-to-day conversation, then it can happen anytime in the positives and the negatives. So are your kids, what kind of is their terminology? Do they use "I'm having a hard time" as well? Or what else? What other
So
ways do you speak about it?
they're still working that out for themselves, truly, in a way that's meaningful for them. I think that I've learned their cues better, their nonverbal cues better, and being able to point out to them what I'm observing. And then I'm curious. I think curiosity is key in these situations. If I can be curious about what they're experiencing, then they can be curious about what they're experiencing. And it doesn't have to be stigmatized. It doesn't have to be a thing. It's just part of life, like you said.
I love that. And when you're saying get it curious, there are things that I would say to my kids. I never really wanted to label so much their emotions. I would label my own. I'm feeling frustrated or whatever, because it can be difficult to decipher. Are you feeling anxious or excited? Those things can look the same in a body
Yeah.
from the outside. So I always wanted them to label their own emotion, but I would say things to them like, "I can see your shoulders are scrunching up. I'm interested in why." Or, "I can see that you're looking all around the room and not at what we're focused on," or whatever. "I'm interested in why." Explaining that
Yeah.
curiosity and then encouraging them to be curious as well. And sometimes they'd be like, "I don't know, Mom." Or
Yeah. Just
sometimes
saying,
it would be really good conversation.
yeah, just those words of "I wonder why,"
Yeah.
and then fill in the blank can be really meaningful. And I think that just like we've talked about so much, that outside of the stressful moments, it's really key to
Mhm.
explain that self-regulation isn't just something to fix your problems.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so we've talked about, surely we want to be doing this kind of all the time, so it isn't just brought up in the moment. But I know that there are parents out there right now who are like, "This sounds perfect in an ideal world, but what actually do you do in the moment when we're really struggling? You're feeling yourself, your heart rate's speeding up, and you're getting really tense, and your kids are all tense. What do you do?"
So that is really a red flag that we've hit that dysregulated point, right? And I think that understanding that it's just a red flag and not jumping to self-judgment is really important for us as moms. I've developed a plan that I go over with moms and help them implement. I call it CPR because it's easy to remember, but compassion is that first step that I was just talking about, of the story that we tell ourselves both in the moment and reflecting on the moment. Those stories are powerful and they really matter. So the C is for developing self-compassion. But the P is for plan, which is what we're talking about now. So when you were in those super dysregulated moments, what do you do? again, we're going to plan outside of these moments what is helpful. And I have a list of 25 free activities that you can try and see what works for you. A lot of those do involve muscle engagement, right? The proprioceptive input that I know that you've talked about before. And they rely some on breath work as well. But let's be honest, usually when we're pushed to that point, it's not going to be as simple as I'm just going to go and take a few deep breaths and everything will be fine. Most of the time, we're past that point. So the plan often includes that muscle engagement. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. We're not talking about like dropping and doing 25 push-ups or anything like that. But wall push-ups are helpful.
I was going to say, I have done that before. And let me tell you, my boys who are very into exercise, they look at me and they're like, what? And then they'll start doing it too. And I was actually talking about it at a conference not too long ago about doing push-ups. And there was a mom who came up after me and she was like, I'm already feeling overwhelmed by all of these sessions and people who are coming in to talk. Let's do the push-ups. And we did it and we were laughing so hard. So no, it doesn't have to be 25 push-ups, but
it
at the same time.
It totally can be. And one of my favorite things to do is just to lean against the wall and walk my feet forward. And that gentle pressure of my body against the wall, and I put my hands on my chest to really feel my breathing, making sure that it's not up here, that it's on my diaphragm, those sorts of things. And while I'm sitting there, that's when to do those deep breaths, to have that full body support. So there's some other suggestions as well that I can share with you to share with your listeners.
Yes,
But
we'll make
really,
sure that's linked in the show notes here for
but
sure.
really getting that whole body engagement is really key, because by that point, you might even be in a fight or flight state, and really letting that stress cycle just run its course. It's okay. It's okay. And it's good. So yes, having a safe place, not just for our kids, but for us as moms, is really important, especially if we hit those overwhelm moments more often than we would like to. Yes, it's not just kids that need an escape place. Moms need it too. In fact, I realized that I've been going back to my bedroom more often because outside is usually that place for me, but it's like over 100 degrees here in
it is
Georgia.
too hot.
So it's way overstimulating to go outside when I'm already flustered. And yeah, so wherever that is for you, sometimes I'll crawl underneath my weighted blanket, which is just denim. It's not even technically a weighted blanket, but just a heavier fabric, and just stay there for a moment, laying down supine, just on my back, looking up, and just monitoring my breathing for a few minutes can be really powerful.
And I love that you mentioned safety in here, because when kids are dysregulated and when adults are dysregulated, that can be a time of punching, hitting, that type of thing. And typically, and I know that we went through this with one of my kiddos, like that actual hit when they would come at you is how much proprioception they're getting through their hands, through their wrist, through their elbow, through their arm. Like they're calming their body through that. So they are seeking out a calming technique. However, a calming technique when it is harmful to somebody else is not helpful, right? It's not helpful.
Right.
So what you've been talking about here with safety, what do you do, or how could you find a safe spot when you're not necessarily in a safe spot? Do you see what I mean?
Okay, so do you mean perhaps if you're not at home, if you're out, or if you're in a place where maybe you can't leave your children?
Yes.
That sort of thing?
Yep.
I think that's why I like leaning on the wall so much, because even if we're out in public, if you don't mind doing wall push-ups at Target, that's fine, but some of us might not.
Right.
But a mom with her grocery cart by the bathroom outside and her kids there and leaning against the wall, taking a few deep breaths, that's okay.
Yeah.
I also really like earplugs. There's so many varieties now. There's just classic safety earplugs, the orange ones. Loops are common now. There's Flare Calmer is my personal preference, because I don't really like the tactile sensation of having something in my ear. And those are super flexible. They're hollow, so you might think how work, but it really just takes the edge off of that for me. So if I can catch it before I've really gotten to that really overstimulated, overwhelmed moment, then those really help. And I think too, knowing back to the patterns, if you know that there's going to be certain places, certain times of day that are going to be challenging for you, then before you get pushed to that point, go
Right.
ahead and choose the further parking place so that you can get more steps in. Or go ahead and put your earplugs in before you go into the store, because it will keep you from getting to that overwhelm point as quickly. There are things that we can do to
hmm
prepare ourselves.
And my husband always giggles at all the people walking around with their Stanley cups right now. And, but I walk around with my straw cup all the time for that exact reason,
Yeah,
taking a
yeah,
few of these sips of cold. Yes, you've got your straw right there. But
yeah.
taking a few sips of cold water through a straw can make all the, and I need a very specific type. I need a spongy straw because I like to chew on it sometimes
Yep,
to
yep,
get
yep,
that
me too.
feedback.
I have
I
the
mean,
silicone straw.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the same thing that I
That's
have.
super.
So,
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is one thing that I think is very powerful to keep us regulated throughout the day. And it's something that a lot of us are doing without realizing we're doing it, is reaching for oral input.
mhm,
And so if you can look for ways to make that more impactful for our nervous system, then why not, right?
mhm,
Opt for the
mhm.
straw, reach for some gum. If you're snacking all day, some of us are doing that and thinking, why am I not losing weight? If we're trying to lose weight, maybe we're trying to self-regulate, and maybe we
Right.
need to figure out a healthy way that we can honor that.
I have moms that talk to me too about their kids who talk, talk, talk all the day. And there are big pieces of that that can't, not for everybody, but it can be because they're seeking out that oral component continuously and they're in control of it then because it's all
Mhm.
the output. And so
Yeah.
try a couple of different things to suck through a straw, chew on gum if that's okay, things that you can suck on or hard candy, things like that that then can help to calm their nervous system by getting the feedback that they're looking for and can calm everyone else's because you're not having
Yes.
to take in all of that input so
Oh,
much.
yes. Yes. I'm sure we all have stories like that where we just thought, oh my goodness, is there not an off switch
Yeah.
here? I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that is one of those things that we can do with our children to
Mhm.
help stay regulated. That's one of my favorite things to tell moms, is when we're thinking about how can we promote self-regulation during our day with our kids. Honestly, a lot of times it's a matter of doing what our child is doing, because children are doing more to regulate themselves than we
Mhm.
often realize that they are. And we as adults and all of our filters and what's appropriate and what's not, we have chosen to ignore what our body
Yep.
is really needing.
And also being a product of the environment of if we were told you have to 1, 2, 3 eyes on me or sit still and listen and all those things,
Yeah.
or you can only eat lunch or going to the water. I literally remember my teacher counting 1, 2, 3 at the water fountain and then you were up, right? Like that was
Oh
it.
my gosh, Sarah, that just brought back a memory.
Right?
Mine used to say 1, 2, 3, go. Like I
So,
really needed that extra.
and I don't, that is not me putting blame on teachers. That is what
But
was
when you have kids,
necessary. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can't spend your whole class session at the water fountain.
Totally. And so we were taught to not necessarily pay attention to what our bodies needed all of the time. And our kids, they haven't been taught that yet necessarily. Some have, but maybe they haven't yet. So if we are observing and watching our own children and being like, what could I learn for my own
Yes.
self?
And those basic needs, we've as moms turned off a lot of that in
Mhm,
favor of what our kids need. And I think that really realign, are we eating enough protein?
mhm.
Is our blood sugar balanced? Like, there are all these other factors that are going to contribute to our ability to self-regulate and therefore co-regulate,
Right.
that are just, it's easy to say this and we know this, but the doing it is hard.
It's hard. I agree. Oh, Whitney, I know that we could talk about this for hours and hours, and I'm so grateful for you being here and for sharing some of the resources that you have. So, how can we, besides the link that's going to be in the show notes, how can we keep up with who you are and all the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so all of my resources are available under Sensational Moms. Sensational.com, Instagram with Sensational Moms, and I also have a free Facebook support group where we are just talking about these things, because awareness is 90% of what's going on with moms. To have the words to put to our experience and to share strategies of what works for us, and it's going to help other people as well. So you can find me there as well.
So good. And I was tell you, my listeners, Whitney is forever posting fantastic things through your Instagram. There's so many times I'm like, man, she's getting it done. So
Thank you.
it's
I'm
so
passionate
great.
about this. It's really changed how I mother my kids and show up as a homeschool mom. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for listening. So have a great day.